reality that our criminal justice system now functions more like a system of racial and social control than a system of crime prevention and control. As I stated in the introduction, what has changed since the collapse of Jim Crow has less to do with the basic structure of our society than the language we use to justify it. In the era of color blindness, it is no longer socially permissible to use race explicitly as a justification for discrimination, exclusion, and social contempt. So we don't. Rather than rely on race, we use our criminal justice system to label people of color criminals and then engage in all the practices that we supposedly left behind. Today, it is perfectly legal to discriminate against criminals in nearly all the ways in which it was once legal to discriminate against African Americans. Once you're labeled a felon, the old forms of discrimination, employment discrimination, housing discrimination, denial of the right to vote, exclusion from jury service, suddenly legal. As a criminal, you have scarcely more rights and arguably less respect than a black man living in Alabama at the height of Jim Crow. We have not ended racial caste in America, we have merely redesigned it. And so I was spending my day interviewing one young black or brown man after another who had called the hotline to report discriminatory stops or searches or abuse by the police. And it was very late in the day, late in the afternoon, and I was getting tired, not eager to go through yet another round of interviews. And this young man walks in carrying a stack of papers, a thick stack of papers about this thick. He had taken detailed notes of his encounters with the police in Oakland over about a 9-month period of time. He had descriptions of every stop, every frisk, every time his car was pulled over and searched. He had descriptions of every encounter as well as names of witnesses, who was there, who could corroborate what the police said and what they did. And on top of that, he had names of officers, in some cases even badge numbers of officers. He just had an unbelievable amount of documentation and detail about this pattern of stops, searches, harassment he had been experiencing by the Oakland police. And the stories he was telling were corroborated by other stories we had heard coming out of his neighborhood about what the police were doing there. And so I started to think to myself, well, maybe he's the one. Maybe he's the one. Maybe he can be our named plaintiff in the class action suit we're planning to file against the Oakland Police Department, alleging pattern of practice of profiling and discrimination. And so I started to get excited. I started asking him a bunch of questions, more questions, get more details, and thinking, yes, actually, he's a good-looking young man. He'll do well in the media. The jury will like him. He's well-spoken. Thinking, he's the one. And then he said something that made me pause, and I said, what did you say? What did you say? Did you just say you're a drug felon? We had actually been screening people with felony records. When people would call our hotline number, we would send a form to them to fill out, asking them a bunch of questions about their experiences with the police, including, have you ever been convicted of a felony? We believed we couldn't represent someone as a named plaintiff in a racial profiling suit if they had been convicted of a felony, because we knew that if we did, law enforcement and the media would be all over us saying, well, of course the police should be keeping their eye on him. He's a felon. He's a criminal. And we knew that we wouldn't be able to put someone with a felony record on the stand as a named plaintiff in a racial profiling case without them being cross-examined for an hour in front of the jury about their prior criminal history, thus distracting the jury's attention away from the law enforcement conduct and turning it into a trial about young man's prior criminal past. And so we had been screening people with prior criminal records, and he had not marked it on his form, checked the metaphorical box. And so I'm sitting there looking at him saying, did you just say you're a drug felon? And he gets quiet and he says, finally, yeah, I'm a drug felon, but let me tell you what happened to me. Let me tell you what happened. Police planted drugs on me. They set up me and my friend. They beat us up. They framed us. He starts telling me this long story about how he'd been framed by the police, and the police planted drugs on them, beat them up, and I'm just saying, oh, I'm sorry. I am sorry. I'm not going to be able to represent you if you have a felony record. And I tried to explain to him why that was the case and how I could understand that why it would seem unfair or wrong. He keeps trying to give me more information, more details. Now he's giving me the names of those officers, their badge numbers, who can corroborate that story. And I am sorry. I am sorry. I am not going to be able to represent you. Then he starts insisting upon his innocence. I'm innocent. I'm telling you, I just took the deal. I just took the plea deal because they told me if I just took the deal that I could just walk. I wouldn't have to do a day in prison. If I just took the deal, I just get felony probation. That's it. It would just be felony probation, and that's it. I was innocent, but I didn't want to do the time. I was scared to go in prison. I just took the deal, but I'm telling you, I didn't do it. I'm telling you the truth. I am sorry. I cannot represent you. And then he becomes enraged, and he says to me, "You're no better than the police. You're no better than the police. The minute I tell you I'm a felon, you just stop listening. You just can't even hear what I have to say." He says, "What's to become of me? What's to become of me?" He says, "I can't get a job anywhere because of my felony record. Anywhere." He said, I can't even get housing. He said, I can't even get access to public housing because of my drug felony. Where am I supposed to sleep? He says, I sleep in my grandma's basement at night because nowhere else will take me in. He said, how am I supposed to take care of myself as a man? He said, I can't even get food stamps. I can't even get food stamps to feed myself. What's to become of me? He says, good luck finding one young black man in my neighborhood they haven't gotten to yet. They've gotten to us all already. And he snatches all those papers up, all those notes, and just starts ripping them up into tiny little pieces. He's throwing them in the air. It's just snow and white paper in my office. And he walks out yelling at me, "You're no better than the police. I can't believe I trusted you." Well, several months after that, I'm in my office. I open up the newspaper. And what's on the front page? The Oakland Riders police scandal is broken. Turns out that a gang of police officers, otherwise known as a drug task force, had been planting drugs on suspects, beating folks up in his neighborhood, and who's identified as the main officer, one of the main officers charged with planting drugs on suspects and beating folks up? Well, it was the officer that he had identified to me as planting drugs on him and beat up him and his friend.